People will look at that and go, yeah, but the research shows you lose muscle mass. It's probably not that simple. If you're using the drugs and you're weight training and eating sufficient protein, then I would guess you probably wouldn't lose, any more muscle mass than somebody else following an average diet who's doing the same. So
for people who don't know what you do, explain what you do.
So I'm a one-to-one nutritionist. Had a background in sport originally, but always wanted to do nutrition. It was kind of like, I think originally I wanted to work in sports nutrition, and kind of once I went through the sports side of things, started delving into more of the nutrition side. Realized actually I wanted to help with, more with sort of, I guess, not just obesity, but people typically struggling with their food. And I've seen a lot of sort of close family members and friends go through things like anorexia and really severely disordered eating, and I was like, that's what I want to do basically. So it was a case of doing my master's in nutrition, and then I went into sort of NHS mental health. I thought that'd be a really good place to kind of learn a lot about that. Not only are eating disorders very common there, but also it gives you real challenges to sort of help someone who's very low to then improve their sort of well-being through whether it's food, through activity, through exercise. I learned an awful lot doing that, and then decided to go one-to-one. So primarily work with people to improve their relationship with food. A lot of them have weight loss goals, but I think probably how I position myself is, I'm all for improving health, whether it's through reducing obesity and other things, but also I think people realize that they have much deeper issues than just losing weight. So I'm quite lucky. People do say, Josh, I want to lose weight, but I recognize I need to learn more about my eating habits. I need to eat more mindfully. I need to improve my relationship with food first before I can move on to that. So we kind of work through a process to, improve those things and then focus on like long-term health outcomes after.
That was really interesting about the NHS and mental health. What kind of link do you feel your mental health has with people who suffer with obesity and weight gain?
I think probably the most, the simplest way for me to explain it is, I worked with people with. So I worked basically I worked at Broadmoor Hospital, which is the most secure place in the country that isn't a prison. Basically, it's more secure than a prison. So people are detained under the Mental Health Act, whether that's because of risk of suicide, but it can be people who have committed a crime but actually have been found to maybe be paranoid or schizophrenic or whatever, and so they're determined that they weren't in control of their actions. So you watch people like that who are very low, and they don't want to come out of bed all day, and you watch someone stay in bed for days upon end. So then your challenge is, how do I even get this person up to even go for a walk, let alone help them eat better? So really challenging, but also so rewarding, because I think something I did was you build sort of working relationships with like the service users, and they then look forward to the time that you're coming around to their ward to even just go for a walk in the garden, because they're not allowed out on their own.
Yeah,
you get up and it's like that escapism of coming off the ward, and then once you build up that sort of relationship, it's then, okay, what else do you want help with? Well, I want help with my food. Okay, let's go through your menu. Let's see what food you're picking, what you're buying from the shop. Let's make sure it's enjoyable, but it supports your goals. And I think seeing things like that, and I think just seeing the difference it can make someone's day of just going for a walk outside, or just going to the gym and lifting a few weights, or I used to go in the sports hall and kick a football around, or play volleyball, or play badminton or something. I think you just see the power of exercise. I think that it was very eye-opening of how a few 30-minute sessions a week of exercise can improve someone's mental health who is so low.
It's funny because I've noticed this after this job, that like mood dictates so much of a person's behaviors.
Yeah.
And it's like, if your mood is really low, the last thing you want to do is exercise. But the funny thing about it is that the one thing that's going to improve your mood is probably doing the thing that you least want to do because you feel like shit.
Yeah, it's like people that it's kind of like a bit of a running joke in a way, but people crack the joke of, you're depressed. Have you tried going outside for a walk, or try going to the gym? It's like, yeah, we know that improves it, but the challenge is how would you overcome that obstacle when you are so low?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was very eye opening. I learned a lot. It was hard work emotionally. Take a lot home with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's exercise has a massive impact on it. But it's like anything, is it's like saying someone obese, right, you need to eat less. Well, they know that, but that's the most challenging thing, isn't it? Why do they eat more? And it's how you unpick that. So it's the same with someone who is low and doesn't exercise. So what are the barriers? How do we make it simple? How do we make it fun?
Well, that's, I think, probably, like, for coaches who aren't experienced to have that kind of experience going into that kind of situation, I presume it's very eye opening in terms of, okay, you create a lot more empathy in terms of, like, when I first started personal training, like, the first thing I'm going to dive into is, okay, we need to train, or we need to make sure that you're eating this and this, when essentially it doesn't really have anything to do with training or has anything to do with diet. It has everything to do with, like, them things that you spoke about, their mental health, their mood, all these kind of barriers that are in front of before we even deep dive into nutrition and training.
Exactly. I think one thing a lot of people forget about, and it's kind of like, my whole ethos is mental health should be the priority, because good luck trying to make long lasting change to your physical health or your weight or anything if the mental health doesn't have an improvement. So sometimes just focusing on what makes you feel better, what makes you feel more alive, what gives you a sense of relief, relaxes you, that sort of stuff, to me always comes first over let's look at how many calories you're eating, or let's go get you to do some exercise that you don't enjoy, that sort of thing. So I think it's really important.
Besides from the mental health barrier, what other kind of barriers do you see come up with people who are obese?
There's a lot. I would say one of the most common thing I come across, but it's probably because it's sort of, I get probably because of how my sort of content is geared, but it's the emotional side of eating, the binge eating, the overeating, the stress eating, the just turn into food to sort of solve an emotion, if you know what I mean. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, especially that I speak to. And then that turns into, I was a bit stressed. So then they sort of associate, well, every time I'm stressed, I go out the shop and I buy some chocolate and some crisps and things. So then that turns into, oh, they're bad foods, because they only ever associate them with the stress eating or the emotional eating. But that's a big part, I find. And I think what I find working with people one-to-one is, once you unpack that and you delve into it and see where it comes from, it could come from childhood, it could come from the loss of a loved one, it could come from being called fat once you were a child. When you unpack where that's from, you can kind of work backwards and try and break it down and find other things that they can replace that with, and try and encourage them to include those foods, like, with permission, and say, all right, cool, you only see chocolate when you overeat it in response to stress. Why don't we start having it for lunch so that you actually feel in control of chocolate, if you know what I mean? And then we find something else to do when you're stressed. And it's not easy. Once you start finding that sort of that solution, and then they can do that themselves, like, I find the lift in their sort of confidence. They go from a few weeks ago being, Josh, I get so many messages that, and even people working with me, like, I don't think you'll be able to help me, Josh, from a lost cause and all this sort of stuff. And it's a severe, like, I'm afraid of dying, I'm afraid I could drop dead tomorrow, I want to be here for my children. And then literally within a month, they're like, I'm not a binge eater, am I? Like, I've just realized it's changed. Be really powerful, and I find that's probably the most common thing, but also the most important thing I do, doing that at the start, focusing on that
So emotional eating is a big part, and stopping them from doing that with different strategies. Is there any other strategies that you implement that you haven't mentioned there, in terms of emotional eating, to stop, to help them to use other ways as a coping mechanism for further stress?
Yeah, so one thing I think is really important is you're trying to frame it to being more mindful with your food, so focusing on mindful eating.
What is mindful eating? Because I know a lot of people will have heard the term mindful eating, but they might not understand what it is, essentially.
Well, basically it's the opposite to minus eating. So I would say, how many times do people find themselves really hungry or really stressed, and they're just in the kitchen emptying the cupboards?
Yeah.
You know, they've got a few hours or an hour to go to dinner, and then they end up going to have dinner and they're like, I'm full because I've just eaten so much. So it's trying to be more present in the moment, try and work out, okay, am I actually hungry, or is it another emotion causing me to go for food? If so, what is that emotion? Is there anything else that I can do to relieve that emotion that isn't necessarily based around food? And don't get me wrong, food can still be used. Like, you know, food is a comfort tool. You know, we all have comfort meals. We all, you know, Friday night, once night, I'll probably be sat there watching a film, eating a pizza. That's my comfort thing on a Friday night. I'm not going to change that, but it's trying to, be more present, try and identify what your eating habits are, what causes them, and then try and go through a process of first becoming aware of them and then trying to change that behavior. So, you know, for example, if it's, let's say someone has a really emotional, stressful job, and they find, you know, they come out of work and the first thing they do is, you know, they're buying food on the way home, all right, because in response to stress. So it's, okay, is there anything that I can do right now that's going to help reduce that stress? So, you know, something I've done with clients is, why don't you, when you finish, the first thing you do, you go for a walk. But instead of saying, I'm not going to eat, you take the chocolate bar or something with you. So you're going on the walk and your only focus is relax and enjoy the chocolate, but it's one bar instead of five, you know? So it's trying to focus on strategies like that, and they're very different for everyone else. You know, I have clients who will go and do a crossword or a puzzle or do some coloring, or, you know, do some yoga or go for a walk or take a bath. You know, it's trying to, or sit in the garden, listen to the birds, like stuff that people will laugh at, but it's finding something that you find relaxes you and can bring you back down to a bit of more like rational thinking. But also saying, if I want the chocolate, let's have it, but can I just be more mindful about the amount I'm going to have? Because chocolate's not going anywhere. There's more in the cupboard if I want it more, if I want more later. Shops around the corner if I want more later. But can I just try and be more mindful now and just think about, how do I want to feel in an hour's time? Do I want to feel really overfull and regret eating all that chocolate? Or do I want to feel like, actually, I found something else that reduces my stress. I had a bit of chocolate because I wanted to, and actually I feel much more better an hour or two later. And I don't wake up with the guilt or the regret the next day. So
what people will essentially probably try to do initially, I would imagine, when you get them to implement them strategies and actions, is just say no to the chocolate bar altogether. Why would that be a detrimental thing to do?
just imagine you've said, all right, I'm not going to have any chocolate. I'm going to be good for, you know, such and such period of time. And you go a few days without having chocolate, and then you go and have a really stressful day at work, or you have an argument with your partner, or I don't know, your kids get excluded from school, whatever it is, and you haven't had the chocolate and you've been craving chocolate for a few days. The likelihood is you're going to go and eat more chocolate in one go. But what I would say is, why not spread that chocolate out over the week evenly each day? You might eat the same amount of chocolate at the end of the week, but I bet you've enjoyed it more. And I bet you feel more comfortable afterwards. You don't get that feeling of, oh, I feel sick now, I feel overfull.
Which is obviously a common thing when people emotionally eat, is they kind of eat until they're almost sick.
And then they feel like crap, and then they beat themselves up, and then they're harsh on themselves, and then the cycle just, you know, continues.
Yeah. When we spoke about the way that they restrict chocolate and then, you know, consume it in large amounts, essentially that's kind of behaviors of being trapped in a yo-yo diet cycle. Would it be?
Quite often. I think one of the problems with yo-yo dieting is it makes people perceive themselves to be a failure, because they've tried so many diets over the last goodness knows how many years, and they're like, well, none of them worked long term, so I'm a failure. And it's like, if you actually strip it back and look at those diets, are they designed to work long term? Are they, you know, do they make you miserable? Do they make you miss out on going out down the pub for a beer and a burger with your mates at the weekend? Like, they don't allow for those sorts of things, so your life isn't going to be enjoyable. And I think it's kind of trying to help people reflect and say, right, how many diets have I tried in the last however many years? Okay, have any of them worked? Or am I, you know, back to square one? Maybe, I don't know, maybe you put on more weight. Okay, then you need to kind of think, do I just rule out those kind of diets? And do I look at a different approach? So what is the issue? Well, you know, I like chocolate, I emotionally eat. Okay, well, they're the most important things that you kind of need to address, rather than just dieting. Because dieting is not going to fix that. Poor relationship with food is going to make it worse. All right, dieting is not going to fix the confidence issues that you have with yourself or your happiness. You've probably got to look a bit deeper and try and address the root of the problem rather than just thinking, I need another diet.
So to get people away from the diets that aren't working and to get them closer to a diet that suits their overall lifestyle and obviously their goals and their quality of life, how do you navigate that transition?
Say that again.
So how do you navigate that transition from, someone who's been kind of yo-yo dieting and doing lots of diets that have failed and, in a poor position now, to helping them to find a way of eating that is suitable to their lifestyle? How do you approach that?
The first thing we do, which is really important, is we sort of, dive into their goals, their past, things like that. So, if someone says to me, yeah, I want to lose weight. So why do you want to lose weight? What's the importance of losing weight? And it could be something from, I have these clothes that I really love and I don't fit into. And it's not so much the size of the clothes, it's I want to wear these type of clothes because they make me feel more like myself. It could be, I lost my parents at a young age because of, hereditary disease. I don't want to have that. I want to be here for my children. So I think finding out the reason why is so important first, and then trying to find out why they're in the situation they are. So, what are the eating habits that, are preventing them from getting to where they are? And then we'll dive more into like that overall diet. So instead of me saying, right, here's what you should do this, do this, do this, I typically get them to record like a 7-day food diary. And so be honest, there's no judgment, include the weekends. I don't care if you go out and have 10 pints, I'll do the same. It's not, I'm a normal person. There's no judgment or anything. And then we go through it together and I get them to look at it and say, where do you feel you can make the improvement? All right. So instead of, because we know if someone just tells you what to do, you're probably not going to stick to it. But if you can look at it and go, okay, I think I need to improve this, and I think I could do this by doing this, makes it more likely to be a longer lasting change, and trying to make sure that it is suitable for them. So it's all well and good saying, they might say, well, yeah, I could have a better breakfast like poached eggs and avocado on toast. But then you might have to look at, okay, what time do you leave for work in the morning? Is that feasible in the morning? All right. So maybe we do that at the weekends when you have a bit more time. But during the week, we need to make sure you got a quick and easy breakfast. So it's just breaking down sort of the potential hurdles and then mini solutions for them.
Yeah, so being really understanding your client, what they've done in the past, what their situation is, and coaching the person rather than the program to a sense.
The thing we've got to realize is we're all completely unique, right? We have completely different bodies, completely different preferences, behaviors, jobs, families. I don't have kids, but most of my clients have kids. So their demands on time that are so different to mine, I can pick and choose when I want to eat, but people with kids can't. So it's kind of working out what's going to suit them, and that's the most important thing, I think.
What's your thoughts on skipping breakfast? Because I know the type of clients that you have would be very much in the category of when they're starting is that they're essentially probably under eating a lot in the morning and over eating in the evenings, are they?
Yeah, typically. I think as an actual concept, whether you eat breakfast or not, I don't personally think for the average person, it's a big issue. Like I eat breakfast, but I probably don't eat it till very late morning, midday.
Yeah.
Some people sound bonkers, but I'm not hungry in the morning. And I'm not, and I'd rather just eat my porridge or whatever it is, later in the morning. But I think for the typical person, probably not an issue. But I would say if you are someone who typically struggles with any type of, evening, let's say overeating, whether it's emotional, binge eating, anything like that, it's probably not a good idea because it's only likely to increase the hunger. So if you're then adding that to the stress or the emotion, probably not great. And if you're someone who typically, does get hungry later in the day, then, I would say, why not try having breakfast? And, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that, having a bigger breakfast and having, a bigger lunch compared to what we typically have and having a smaller dinner probably helps. Because it helps you regulate your appetite and it takes, you're less hungry in the evening, so you're less likely to go into the snack cupboard. If someone's still hungry after dinner, most people don't typically go and have something like yogurt and some fruit, do they? They go,
No.
where's the crisps or where's the chocolate? So I think for some people it can make that a lot easier because they don't have that, as high of an appetite in the evening.
Yeah, I remember actually reading that study only a couple of weeks ago about having a bigger intake of breakfast and lunch over dinner can help to regulate weight, which I thought was really interesting. Just because you get a lot of people online who just say, "I'll just skip breakfast and just fast and you'll lose weight." And obviously, maybe that advice might work for some, but
Yeah.
it's not going to be
And
a blanket statement for everyone.
no, and the concept sounds simple and it sounds reasonable, and for some people it can be. But like I was having this conversation with somebody last night on the phone, one of my clients, and they were saying, Josh, I started with you, I don't know, 2 months ago, something like that. And they were like, you told me, I didn't eat breakfast. You said, let's focus on eating breakfast. I was like, I am never going to eat breakfast. And she was like, now I can't live without it because I feel so much better in the morning. I have more energy and I don't come in from work going, I need to empty the cupboards. That little change for some people makes a huge difference. It just makes it easier for them to stick to how they want to eat, rather than feeling like I can't control this.
Yeah, and I used to be one of them people as well who was like, I never have an appetite for breakfast in the morning. But then when my schedule changed and I started to kind of had to have breakfast in the morning, and then when I noticed I was eating breakfast in the morning, what happened? I had an appetite for breakfast in the morning. So sometimes it's you're not going to get the thing until you do the thing.
Exactly, and everyone's different on their different routines, different. If you're someone who gets up and sits at a desk at home in the morning, your demand for breakfast probably isn't as big as someone who's like a postman who's out delivering stuff early in the morning. You have to factor that in. Then you have to factor in like the psychological elements of people. They are different, and some people, it does make their appetite and their routine of food easier during the day. So it's just different for everybody else.
Yeah. Moving on to obesity, which I wanted to deep dive in a lot with you today. So, first of all, as a society, what are we getting wrong about obesity?
That's a good question, isn't it? I think one thing that really sort of frustrates me is just people's outlook on obesity, and just I think people are very judgmental. I know, like we're quite vocal about sort of the stigma around mental health now, like a lot more than we were 10, 15, 20 years ago. But I just think you've only got to look in like, in the news and whatever, or social media, people are fat phobic, and it's like, right, just because somebody's, overweight or obese or whatever, it, doesn't change them as a person. They still deserve the same respect, the same medical care, the same. I just think that is a big issue that we probably need to address. How you do that, I don't know.
Why is it as a society, why is it from the general public that we take things like mental health really serious, but things like obesity we cause more judgment and more shame around it than other.
I don't know. I think there's a few reasons. I think there's a maybe not a large population, but a population of the country, of the world, whatever, who have never struggled with their weight. All right. So they perceive it as easy. They can eat what they like. Some can eat whatever they like. They'll never put on weight. Some people will think about what they eat, but they find it easy. They'll never put on weight. And I think they can never experience or understand what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes. So they just see it as, well, they're not trying hard enough. They're lazy. They don't care. And then I think you've got another group of people who just think it's just down to, well, you just need to do some more exercise, or you just need to eat less. And actually they don't have the understanding of the psychological element, the fact that some people, genetically are, have a higher chance of being obese because maybe their appetite regulation isn't as, efficient as somebody else. So I think it's a lack of understanding, and with that comes a lack of sort of empathy. And I think, if you put yourself in someone's shoes who, has struggled with their weight and already has low confidence, low self-esteem, to then be told it's just because you're not working hard enough, or it's just because you're lazy, or it's just because you can't control your eating and you're not trying hard enough, imagine then what it does to them. Does it make it even harder to lose weight? I think it's that lack of understanding.
I think also with that lack of understanding, someone who doesn't understand the complexities of obesity, one of their arguments would be, oh well, my mate John down the road was obese and now he's not anymore, so why can't you do it? For that argument's sake, what would you say about that?
I think, again, going back to everybody is very different, and their mate John down the road probably found the solution that worked for them. Now, that doesn't mean that that solution is going to work for somebody else. It just means that John found that solution, whether that was working with someone, whether it was finding a new passion that was activity based, whether it was just having a real drive to say, do you know what? I'm fed up of eating like this. It's a realism of, if this doesn't make me feel good, I'm going to make a change. Some people can do that. Some people need support. Some people need guidance. I think it is trying to understand what that person struggles with, and then trying to, come up with a plan for that specific person.
And it also goes back to what we were talking about at the start when we started off this podcast with you talking about the NHS and mental health. Maybe John down the road has sorted out what's going on upstairs, while this other person is actually suffering with their mental health at the moment, which is something that people have a lot of empathy towards.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I saw something like this the other day, and it was I can't remember where it was, but it was a story about someone who had finally got help for their mental health and then lost a load of weight. It was like, I didn't actually change anything apart from what was going on in my head, and I got that help, and then it allowed me to find out who I really was, and I started loving walking again and all those sorts of things, and I started eating better. And sometimes it can be something that's nothing to do with the obesity itself. There's an underlying factor that's causing it.
And then also another thing with people that don't get it, well, maybe you've never been obese before, but you grew up in a two-parent income household who cooked homemade meals every night, and you were brought to your sports team every day since you grew up. So like for someone like that, it might be a lot easier for them to manage their weight, whereas someone who maybe comes from a home, maybe it's a single parent background, who was out all the time working, maybe had to come home late, maybe had to order the takeaways, maybe didn't have the money to put their kids into sports clubs and stuff like that. So would you say environment as well as that plays a huge role in terms of
So there's a really, really good podcast on this. It's called The Social Economic Elephant in the Room, I think. And it's by Alan Flanagan and Dr. Josh Wolwich. And if you've never really thought about it, it even breaks down like the difference in life expectancy between like the rich areas in London and the poor areas. And it's like they have the access to the same food. They live a couple of miles apart. The life expectancy is so different. And I think people, like, we're going to see it, right? With the cost of living crisis and everything, the cost of food going up. You've only got to look at, the cost of milk, cheese, fish, meats, vegetables, things like broccoli. Broccoli's gone up by like, what has it gone up on average by like 60 to 95p or something like that. Now you add that to somebody whose bills have gone up, then they're not going to be able to afford stuff like that. But it is typically easy. And people go, well, your junk food's more expensive, but think of the amount of energy you get from something, all right? From something that's cheaper. Like if you go buy, I don't know, crisps or pizza or stuff like that, pot noodle, the energy you get in it compared to the energy you get from a broccoli. So if you've only got a certain amount of money to feed your kids or feed yourself, you're looking for the most amount of energy you can get from your £1 or your £2. I think people forget that kind of stuff. But it's going to be challenging.
Yeah.
So like, on obesity.
That's why when people don't understand that privilege is a real thing when it comes to health and fitness, I don't think people get that. So like we're not all on even playing field, and the gap is probably getting larger, as you said.
Massive. I even saw one of the carnivore advocates the other day finally talking. I don't care about the carnivore diet. I think it's ridiculous, but he was finally talking about that actually it is the diet for the privileged and a diet for the rich. And I was like, finally, at least someone has said it.
Yeah.
And then you still get people replying to it going, oh no, it's really cheap to eat a carnivore diet. And he's like, okay.
Same with organic food as well. So why did you just get it organic? Moving on from some of the reasons that contribute to obesity. Obviously, we've looked at genetics, we've looked at environment. Actually, we haven't actually spoke too much about genetics. Can you just explain to someone that wouldn't have a clue about how genetics plays a factor in weight gain, what are the components to that?
To keep it really, really simple, it's not that somebody wakes up and they're genetically they can eat the same amount of energy and do the same amount of exercise, and genetically they're going to be 5 stone heavier. It's not like that. But genetically, we all have a different makeup of, everything, like hormones, and if you want to go into depth, things like that. But some things will make it easier for somebody to put on weight, or they may have less appetite regulation. And you've got to look at things like disabilities. People are born with a disability. Do they have the same ability to be able to go and walk like we do? No. So then they are, because of their genetics, they're potentially given a bit of an unfair hand with things like
You know what? I never even thought about that.
Yeah, it's it's funny. It came to me the other day, and I was like, I was talking to somebody about genetics, and it came to me, and I was like, I have clients that are in a wheelchair, right? And it's like, it was genetic, and the people will be out there saying, no, it's nothing to do with genetics. Obesity is not related to genetics. So that's the most simple argument.
Yeah, that's like, if someone comes at me now, that's the argument that I'm gonna use, because it just shuts down the conversation straight away.
So it's not thinking about it like someone's born with a gene that says they're going to be a lot more obese than somebody else. It's look at the whole makeup of everything. All right. What family are you born into? I know that's not necessarily genetics, but what were your parents like? What family are you born into? In terms of how able-bodied are you? And then you look at the makeup of things like hormones and things, and hunger-related hormones. They all have a role. And we look at things like mood. Some things to do with mood can be genetic. We look at a lot of things, disease, things like that. So some people, are dealt an unfair hand, and yet some people are completely ignorant to that. I think that just makes it more challenging, doesn't it? So.
Yeah, that's the argument put by them people. It's like, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get on with it. But they have no idea how difficult it could be for that person who was brought up in an environment that essentially fails them. They might have a genetic deficiency where they're 10 times hungrier than that other person, and then all the other things that you've even spoke about there. So I think that should put to bed the argument that it has anything to do with willpower.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%.
So going on from that leads us on to weight loss drugs, which is obviously a huge controversy at the moment.
Yeah.
Why is it a controversy, and why are people so emotionally invested in shitting on it, essentially? Probably because of the things we've just spoke about.
Some of the stuff we spoke about in terms of the way, a proportion of society are, let's be blunt, are fatphobic. So they think that they're just not trying enough. So why should they get medication, or why should we as the taxpayer fund medication, or all those silly things that people come up with.
They think of it as cheating in some ways, don't they?
But what they don't realize is people go, well, why should we fund, these drugs are massively expensive. Why should we fund this? It's like, do you know how much the NHS spends on, disease management and stuff? Through the NHS?
Cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, all these things that cost the taxpayer money.
Yeah. But actually, if we could be more preventative with it, we would reduce the cost spent by the taxpayer. But they don't think of it like that. I think another portion is, I think you've only got to look at how not necessarily just anti-vax people are, but anti-sort of medication people are. Statins, the vaccines, all those types of things. People are very against them. All right. Now, they don't like medication. They think that food is medicine, and that you can cure and prevent all disease from food and exercise. And it's like, that's not how the world has ever worked, ever will, So I think that's a proportion of it. But I just think, again, I think a lot of it is, and I think a big problem is there's some big names, more so in America than in England and Ireland, that are very anti these type of medications, and they have big followings. And what it's like when, you've only got to see like the carnivore and the keto crowd. As soon as someone big starts talking about it, it becomes like a cult following. And it's like people who will comment on our Facebooks or something, you get the most outrageous claims. You can read it, you go, I know exactly where you've been learning your information from, So I
It's all just filtered down arguments, really, isn't it? From
it's
that
like
one.
provide a reference. They can't. They just all they're doing is just word vomiting what they've just heard on YouTube from some American what do you call them? Not a doctor, a naturopath, or one of them. So
Ozempic is the main weight loss drug, isn't it?
yeah, so it's basically a glucon like basically acts as like a glucon like peptide, which then is secreted when you're eating to kind of reduce appetite and increase satiety. So it's going to help people eat less, in theory, because they're not as hungry as they want to eat. I've sat with people whilst they've used it. I've had friends use it. I've had previous colleagues use it. I've spoke to people about it. And it
What's
does.
what's your experience with clients?
I've just lost your sound wise.
Oh
no, it's me. Say again. My Siri.
Sorry. So what is your experience with clients and friends who have used it? What do they say?
I don't have a client using it, but from friends and people I've spoke to, they say that the main thing is they're just not hungry, and it's the first time in their life that they don't go to have dinner, and they're like, well, I'm just going to have a small portion because normally I'm starving and I can't regulate my appetite. I think the most powerful thing for me is, when people say it is, for the first time in my life, I feel in control around food. That's so powerful, and that it's not just that it helps them eat less; it gives them confidence. Actually, I can have, what I consider like a normal amount of food. And I think that's a big one. It's the confidence it gives people.
And I presume, like, even what we haven't touched on, like, by people using these weight loss drugs, if they have a positive effect, by losing weight and being in more control of food and so on and so forth, that's just going to promote even more healthy behaviors and actions for them to implement that they probably couldn't have done before.
Definitely. Like, if let's say somebody loses the drugs look like maybe you lose around 15% of body weight, right?
Yeah.
Let's say someone even loses 5 to 10% of their body weight. The likelihood of them going and walking further because it's more comfortable, is going to increase. So the likelihood of them being more active is going to increase. It's that whole round sort of, they're probably going to feel better, in terms of mental health. They're going to eat better because of portions, and they're then deciding, if my appetite's not that big, what is a healthy dinner? What is nutritious, rather than I just want to eat and eat and eat. So I want all the nice tasting things, and they have less appetite for those type of things. So I think just the all round picture of it, it just helps people make healthier decisions overall.
Yeah, it's like we said even before. It's like you can have the momentum going one way or going the other way, and if it can be a spiral down, or in this case, it can cause positive benefits and positive behaviors to come out of that one thing. I suppose when the weight loss drug first kind of came out, there would have been a lot of put it bluntly, insecure personal trainers who are like, this drug's gonna take, and I presume that is an argument for people who kind of bash it as well, is that they feel that, oh, people are just taking a weight loss drug and that's it.
Yeah, I think people think that like anyone and everyone's going to go use it. There will always be people that abuse stuff, like anything in the world. But it's something that is going to help people massively. And at the end of the day, if this is something that we really need to focus on trying to improve. Is it going to solve the obesity crisis? No. But is it going to help a lot of people feel more confident around their eating habits? Yeah. And anyone who shouldn't want that is probably, I don't know how to describe them, but probably not someone I'd want to spend time with.
No, or work with.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it is a really good step. And I think from like the research, I'm not a doctor, I don't prescribe it, I don't work for anyone with it, but from everything I've read, it seems like this has given the sort of nutrition and health community the most confidence out of anything that I've ever seen, really, that it can make a real change to some people's lives. So yeah, I think it's brilliant. Obviously it's not perfect, and you can delve into, well, when someone stops, will they put the weight back on? Likely, but then that's the same with any type of diet that someone does. but with the right support. And who's to say, someone shouldn't stay on it for a long time? We do it with other medications for other diseases.
Yeah.
So, why would this necessarily be any different? But I think some people might be able to come off it. They might learn enough and have the right help and support. And we don't know what the research is going to say in like 2-3 years' time. There could be something else to help someone come off it. We don't know, do we?
Yeah. And like you said, having the right support. So like I presume it's not something like, okay, you take the weight loss drug and then you continue with the if you've had, let's say, poor eating behaviors and so on and so forth. Let's say you eat a lot of junk food and stuff like that. It's not you don't use the weight loss drug to then eat junk food, but just less of it. And then when you come off it, you still have the same actions and behaviors that got you in the first place. You use it, and then also that aids you into more healthy behaviors and actions that are going to get you to where you want to be.
Exactly. And people are still going to want nutritionists and PTs to help them pick what to eat. How do you improve your diet still? It doesn't show anyone how to exercise, doesn't show anyone what their form is or how to structure an exercise program, or give someone that support of, you're doing great in the gym, look how much your strength's improved and your form's improved. And it doesn't give people that. So they're still going to look for that support alongside it.
Yeah, they're gonna need it. And obviously it's been well put forward that you do this alongside diet and exercise, and making sure that you are getting an adequate amount of protein and resistance training, because you want to hold on to as much muscle mass as possible while losing 15% body weight.
That is, yeah, and it's an important point, because there's been some people, again, mainly over in America, but you see anything on Twitter and stuff. They've been very vocal about the trial showing that people lost a considerable amount of muscle mass, and they're saying, well, technically it makes you fatter then. The thing is, you look at any diet, people lose muscle mass, all right? And when they looked at when they did the trials, basically, to put it simply, they weren't focused on whether people were weight training and necessarily eating enough protein. They were just focused on what impact the drug had. So yes, people lost a considerable amount of weight, and they lost more muscle mass, but then so did like the placebo groups, because no one was weight training, or the majority weren't weight training. So people will look at that and go, yeah, but the research shows you lose muscle mass. But it's probably not that simple. If you're using the drugs and you're weight training and eating sufficient protein, then I would guess you probably wouldn't lose any more muscle mass than somebody else following an average diet who's doing the same. So
yeah. And I think, I mean, if the drug gives you the confidence to actually get in the gym now and train, and you find a new love for that, and then you make that a behavior you're going to do the rest of your life, I mean, that's probably a likelihood that
that is the goal.
Yeah.
If we could find even if somebody didn't lose loads of weight, even if we could find everyone an activity or an exercise that they liked doing, that they enjoyed, that made them feel great, that made them feel confident, that is what we should all want. We all want somebody to find that one thing, whether it's yoga or CrossFit or football or rugby or just going for a walk with your dog every day. It doesn't matter, does it? But I think that that's what we want.
Yeah, 100%. So just to move on from obesity, and just for the last few minutes diving into just general weight loss, and the general public who just want to lose a couple of pounds and just get in better shape. Is there a right time and a wrong time to go on a diet, in your opinion?
Yeah, there's probably, I think, instead of saying, is there a right time to go on a diet, I think you should probably look at what's the most important thing for me to do right now. So if you're not active, all right, and you're trying to lose weight, instead of hopping on a new diet, maybe the priority should be, can I focus on activity first? Because that's probably going to have a bigger short-term impact on your health, all right? And that's probably going to improve your mental health. If you take someone who's completely sedentary and doesn't eat well, and you say, the only thing we're going to change for now is just going to get you walking outside 20 minutes with a dog every day, that's probably going to have a bigger impact on their mood and their overall health than just saying, let's change your diet and go on a diet. So I always think, start with the thing that you feel is most important and work on that first, rather than jumping straight for a diet. Try and change a couple of behaviors. That's probably going to get you better success. Focus on what's really important to you.
Diet's a funny word, isn't it? Because three people can be having a conversation about a diet and be we could having a completely different conversation. So what I
Yeah.
was going to ask you essentially is like, you know, you have the arguments of like, you know, strong diet culture who's like, you know, do keto or do the carnivore diet and blah 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 blah. And then you have like on the other subgroup who would be like, oh, no diets work, all diets fail, or 95% of diets fail. Like what, when you think of diet, what do you think? And what would be your argument between them two subgroups?
See, when I hear diet, I think because I'm so ingrained in that industry and I despise it, I just think of the restrictive stuff.
Yeah,
But
yeah. So you think of the anti-diet culture.
yeah, yeah. So, but like, I'm not necessarily like anti-diet because yeah, I do see dieting as like, there can be really positive ways of dieting, and I suppose in a sense, my clients they feel like they're on a diet, but some of them are losing weight. So, you could say technically it's a diet, but I see it more as like behavior.
A way of living,
Yeah, yeah.
a lifestyle
But
change.
what I would say to somebody is go and if you see someone or someone that you trust, whether they're a PT, whether they're a nutritionist, go and chat to them, tell them what your goals are, and then say, "Can you help me?" Because someone might come to you and say, "Carl, I want to lose a load of weight," and you go, "Right, cool, let's have a look at your lifestyle." Okay, you don't do any sort of movement at all, do you? No. Well, why don't we focus on that first? Let's get you in the gym. Let's see if you enjoy doing some PT with me. That sort of thing. So anyone that is sort of responsible and well in tune with like the general public should be able to personalize whatever the approach is for that
Yeah,
individual.
because when I think of diet, when I'm talking about diet to my clients, I'm not even thinking about food in my head. I'm thinking about, oh yeah, how they move, how they train, how they eat, are they in control of food, all these other health benefits,
Yeah,
like, which is, so then I could be having a completely wrong
that's
conversation with
fine.
someone else.
That's fine. I think like we're saying, I think it's like when someone comes to you, it's right. What do you want to do? What do you think is the most important thing right now to improve your health? Let's start there. And that could be changing your eating habits. Right. So technically you could say it's dieting, but it could be something else, nothing to do with food. And I've had clients where they come to me and we don't even look at food for the first few weeks because I feel actually we're going to get more from this if we look elsewhere and give you a lift first. And when you feel like, yeah, I'm moving, I'm feeling a bit better, then we can go, right, now let's have a look at your diet and let's try and change a couple of things. I think it's just working out what's the best for the individual and making sure that they feel happy with what you're saying, you're
Yeah,
suggesting.
like you said about finding out what it is that they actually want and what their why is. Because some people will come to you saying that they want to lose weight, but what they're really saying, if you dig deep into that, is I want to feel healthier and I want to feel good about myself. Well, you might not need to change anything in their diet to do that because they're going from being inactive to moving, going from not training to training, going from staying up all night to getting 8 hours sleep, having a glass of water in the morning, all these like health behaviors that will make them feel 10 times better without actually changing anything.
Yeah, you'll have worked with people. I was reading someone's checking form this morning and they said, I'm not even fussed about the scale or weight loss anymore. I just feel really good as I am now. And you'll have worked with people like that. And it's just focusing on those behaviors and what makes them feel healthier and happier is much more important. And some will finally realize that. And then that's like, whoa, it's like a light bulb moment. Like I've been worried about what a number says on the scale for so long. And now I wake up and I'm like, I wear the clothes I want. I go do my walk every day. I love my strength training. I love, making meals with my family that we all enjoy that sort of support my goals with the kids like. And they're like, yeah, this is what life's about,
Sometimes that's what they're saying when they're saying I want to
yeah,
lose a stone.
but we're conditioned to thinking it has to be weight loss will fix everything.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
sometimes movement.
yeah. But I think it's so ingrained in them that weight loss is the
Yeah,
solution to their problem.
yeah, definitely.
Last question I'll ask you, and then I'll let you go. No, actually, I won't ask that question. I'll ask, what's the one thing you see people getting wrong consistently when it comes to weight loss?
It has to be jumping from one diet. Like I know we spoke about it, but it has to be jumping from one diet to another because if you've been dieting for a period of time and you haven't found something that works, there's not going to be a magic diet that you've not discovered in the last few years. Yeah, you have to kind of dig deeper. And whether that is working with someone, that might be. But if you add up, I remember I worked with someone from America and they were like, they weren't sure about investing in coaching. And I didn't tell them to do this, but what made them sign up is they went, I've just added up all the money I've spent over the last couple of years in all these diets and keto supplements and stuff like this. And they were like, it came to thousands of pounds. And they were like, so actually, I'm going to invest in you. and you're going to help me find, the solution. And it didn't involve, anything silly or restrictive. So I think it's just jumping from one thing to another and just realizing that, that just makes you feel worse because you just feel like a failure, I think.
Yeah, that is them getting trapped in that yo-yo diet cycle, isn't it?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's even they go back to the same diet because, well, initially they did lose like 10, 15 pounds on that diet. So then they're like, oh, well, that worked for me the last time, but did it really work for you because you're going back to it now because you've put back on the weight?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Listen, Josh, a pleasure as always to have you. Thanks for your time. Before we jump off, if people want to find out a little bit more about you, about your work, where can they go to find you?
Instagram, probably the best place. I have Facebook as well, but just Joshua Hills Nutrition on Instagram. And yeah, I hope you don't mind saying this, Carl, but we spoke a bit about mindful eating earlier. And there is a completely free training video on my bio if you just want to download it for free. Just pop your address and you'll get it free. So if you want to learn more about that side of things.
Yeah. I was actually going to say to you, I'm going to rob that and send it to my clients.
Yeah, I do, mate. I don't mind. I've told people, I think I say in the video, if this helps you, send it to someone else.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed another episode of The Uneducated PT with me, your host, Carl O'Rourke. If you did, don't forget to subscribe.